Hey everyone, we're going to get started. So it's great to see you all today for our collective exhibition tour and talk. This is the last one of the season, and it features the work of Meghan Cox, Keith Leitner, Jacob Lunderby, Colleen O'Donnell, and Susan Sullivan. So the exhibit is on through July 25th. And we are open, so you can come down and see the show if you're so inclined. We're open Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 6, and Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 6. And we have parking, which is nice. And you can also see everything on our website. So everything's available on the site. So I'll put a link in the chat later. So I'll tell you how we're going to do this today. So we're going to first have a tour of the exhibition. So Tina's gonna go through the exhibit with her phone, and each artist will speak about their work. And then we're going to split out into breakout rooms. So each artist has a room, and you can ask them questions and visit with them. So you'll want to hold your questions to the end till we get to the breakout room. That's it. Okay, so we'll get started. So I'm going to spotlight Tina's camera for you. And I'd ask that you stay muted during the talk because we pick up your background noise. The first artist we're going to visit is Meghan Cox. So Meghan, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. How are you?
Fine. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work in this exhibit?
I'd love to. And thank you, Mike and Tina, for all of your help in this. And I'm sitting here with my partner, Jacob, who has an exhibition across the hall. So all of this work was basically made during a long period of quarantine. And so it gave me time to kind of really work through many of these paintings. And these front two paintings that are on the outside of the space, I was trying to work my way into the paintings, and I'm very committed to a small scale and spending a long time with a small scale. And I had been like kind of hoarding these pattern paper, like Cartos and some other like Italian companies make these beautiful pattern papers. And I just was really interested in just designing in a square and having to deal with this kind of problematic almost just in terms of working out the perspective of the pattern, but also just the design of a circle and the square, and having to kind of incorporate that. At the same time, during COVID, eating a lot of snacks, so that became incorporated in the paintings. And I've always had kind of a strange love of the Cook's Illustrated covers, and never knew how to kind of get into like putting food into paintings. I was also interested in space and time. So there's like the natural light that the setup of the still lifes were set up in. And then I would take the painting and with artificial light, kind of cut out pieces of paper and just kind of collage them on the painting and see what worked. And then paint them directly, almost kind of Trump oil or whatever, and try to kind of confuse the sense of light and confuse the sense of space, but also really think abstractly again about like triangles and circles and squares and then the rectangles within the square. And the work that's on the inside, that is work that just currently came down last month, or a little over a month ago from Undercurrent in New York City, in Brooklyn. And again, I was kind of moving away from the just strictly like, strictly just kind of setting up with the pattern paper, because I was really interested in this kind of condensed, like small space. And then just wanting to kind of open that up and just create an atmospheric space a little bit more. And instead of using this pattern as context, used it as subject matter. And it became really I really was able to improvise with the cut paper and the pattern and just move things around. And then on top of that, during the past year, we were looking at, I mean, me personally, I was still looking at a lot of paintings, but it was always through art books, rather than going to the PMA or going elsewhere. So I was started to really consider the way that we think about art and think about viewing art, and was looking at a Toma Ops, which is a German painter book. Mom, if you're there, the catalog is on the coffee table right now, but like it's a Yale University Press book, and just the way that the images were formatted on the page, sometimes they were split, like you'd have like a painting that was like cut down the middle and formatted on 2 pages, or just the way that the margins inform the way we see the paintings. I just sort of wanted to start experimenting with those kind of margins. So all these paintings are actually on paper. They're on arches paper that are glued down on birch panels, so the sides are exposed. And basically the paper is still it's still raw. I haven't treated the paper itself, but just would mask off the area to paint inside of. Then, like I said, I would just kind of really play around with the format of the little kind of cut paper setups, and play with a specific time of day, what kind of light. And this format specifically is the one that was kind of the most common that I worked with. It just really, to me, like really spoke of book plates quite a bit. And at first it was kind of like I was tied to observation, and still am all throughout the work, but I did start to experiment a little bit with some of the later paintings, in terms of putting it into Photoshop and sort of like, well, what if I exaggerate this color a little bit, or do something else? So, and then that kind of led me towards this place of invention, which is not a place I'm very comfortable with at all, but it was really fun to be able to take, what was right in front of me. I'm not someone, I feel like when something's in front of me, whatever, I can make it happen, but if you ask me to draw a horse, I can't do it unless it's in front of me. So it was really interesting to be able to invent in a way that's really more about context, like the strength of the shadow, or like exaggerating a color of a light, or exaggerating the sense of atmosphere, or really playing with edges. Like this is going to be a really strong edge, and this is going to be soft edge. It's going to play with kind of the illusion of the surface a little bit. And then at the previous exhibition, I had painted the walls behind, because again, the margins are very much a part of how I think about these paintings. And they don't sit as well in front of just like if the wall is the same temperature. So using at this space, using some of the papers that I incorporate in the paintings really to be part of, it sort of took the paintings to a different place where the pattern paper behind the paintings are really part of the context of the painting itself. So this one right here is one that I really kind of played with in terms of invention quite a bit. And yeah, in a lot of the backgrounds too, there's invention. And I have a very specific space that I painted in. It has a bump out. We have an old Philadelphia house, and it has this really strange bump out. So it would create like this very hard cast shadow in the back. And then the light is coming from the east. So it's not, sometimes it'd be really, really direct, and I'd really respond to that. This was one that I invented quite a bit. The middle triangle is one that was completely invented. The back triangle and the front triangle were pushed together. But I was really interested also in these triangular forms and making them really imperfect and really clunky on purpose, because there's a distance created within the margins of the painting. So making these kind of clunky triangles, and then you've got these like swirly, twirly Italian patterns. So the triangles seem to counteract that a little bit. And I do like this kind of play between something feeling extremely serious, but also not serious at all and really playful. And that happens in the light and the like hard shadows versus the soft shadows. And a lot of that spatially really doesn't make sense, but I'm trying to let it all fold together and in that way. But yeah, I think I'm trying to remember the last one, but you know, just also trying to incorporate solid colors and really unappealing shapes, you know, like that. I always think of this one as like the carrot stick, but it is like the best part of making these paintings, or just improvising with like the cut paper. I'm like, oh, I'm going to put a little cut here to create like a negative shape here. And then I get to paint that cast shadow and really play with those transparencies. And then I've got a corner off to the side, which shouldn't make any sense. And yeah, and again, then it was fun to get to like the match with the papers behind it, and really improvise in that way. I think that's everything. I think I managed to ramble my way through all of that.
So Megan, you're very particular about the arrangement of the works and also editing out works. So not all of the work is included. So
yes, I always think like, who said it, like Coco Chanel or whatever, like take everything and then take several things away again. Yeah, so I came with more work, but these, I think, especially with those pattern backgrounds, I feel like they need space in order to read, because otherwise they'll just feel like, oh, pattern and painting and all this kind of crammed in there. So yeah, there's some more work that's in inventory.
Well, it's a fantastic show. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to carry on and visit Colleen O'Donnell. Hello, Colleen.
Oops. Hello. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. You want to talk a bit about yourself in the show?
Sure. Thank you. Well, I wanted to say too, I did write some poems about each piece, but I think I'll do that maybe during the breakout. But these drawings here were done as kind of sketches that I like to do while I'm working. So they're in colored pencil and hand matted and framed, and they kind of are part of my process a lot of times to help me edit. So they're not exact copies of the sculptures I made. This series in the gallery right now is a series of assemblage sculptures, mostly based things I've collected from nature, kind of all over the place. And I started these last year, the beginning of last year, and then at PAFA I teach a clay class, and so when COVID hit, that ended. And so I really, you know, like everybody else, stayed inside and really started to focus on assemblage, because I had all this material that I collected and put in my pockets over the years. So it was really kind of a real journey for me. It's a new process for me. You know, I haven't experimented with assemblage before. And of course, there was a lot going on during last year. And so a part of it, for me, a big part of it was to just kind of be almost meditative and kind of quiet and in tune with, you know, spending a lot of time in nature, as I'm sure many of us have. And, you know, just really, really embrace it. and observe it and make it more, you know, accessible to me, more, you know, just noticing the beauty of it and just putting simple, you know, I started out very simple, like, I don't know if you guys could see this, but it's a couple little stones that I put together and, you know, cleaned up a little bit and shined up. And they're just so gorgeous. To me, they're like Henry Moore or Brancusi sculptures. You know, they were Barbara Hepworth, of course, was a big collector of objects. Georgia O'Keeffe. So I really enjoyed, you know, this whole process of taking these things out of boxes and trying to put them together to make something that's aesthetically pleasing and spiritually a little, you know, meditative for me. And I really, you know, I still have a lot of stuff here to work on. So I focus mostly on nature. Here, of course, there's incorporated the blue screw and the nails I painted red and a piece of iron I have that I have used for armatures and things like that. And so when I get to the poetry, maybe, you know, to me, that's a part of it. Like this is part A, and then the little, very small poems I wrote are part B. So it's a matter of, for me, it was a matter of really honing down to the essentials. And just like, you know, a Brancusi would try to, his goal, one of his big goals was to get the essence of something. And that was my goal here. If you look at the drawing for this one, you'll see I swapped out, I was going to put bottle caps in there, and then I snuck a straw in there as part of, you know, the reality, you know, of our natural world today. And but it's not, you know, when I go to the Jersey Shore, I don't see a lot of that. It's kind of hidden in there. So I decided to add that element in there. This piece is one of my totems. I made 3 totems a few years back. I do a lot of figurative work. Again, you know, honing down to the essence of the figure and what I'm trying to express, using that as a vehicle. And for these, I incorporated a couple of different things. I attended you know, the dance performances at the Annenberg Center. You know, they get people, companies from all over the world, and you know, that's always really exciting. So I brought my sketchbook and did a lot of sketching in there while the performances were going on. And of course, again, you know, totems are you know, Brancusi and his wood and whatnot did that. So I wanted to do that in my medium, which was the clay, and then those are cast in bronze. I did all the casting for that. And yeah, so I've showed them all, you know, they're outdoor sculptures. And this one here is different elements of like the earth elements, a bit of a like asphalt slag and almost bony coral. And then of course the split wood, and I put an iron nail in there that kind of ties them together. The, you know, kind of the, you know, natural elements of that. And yeah. What else we got? Oh yeah, this is called The Conversation. So in this piece, you know, I really wanted to bring elements that are similar but different shapes, different colors together, and have them have a visual conversation of sorts. To me, that kind of represents how, you know, with all the division that's going on right now with everybody, you know, just that kind of try to unify things and be able to communicate with each other, even though, you know, we could be very different, but still have the same surface, so to speak. And what else? Oh, yes. So this one, I was fortunate. I got to travel to Europe a bit in the past few years. So I got to see a lot of prehistoric art that I really love in France and Vienna. And so to me, this kind of was like an unearthing, you know, bemusing myself, an unearthing of prehistoric forms in the form of a Venus here. So putting that together on that piece of wood, and then having the stones also have anthropomorphic shapes. So, yeah. And this is the second totem. So I did 3. I worked on the 3 sculptures at the same time. So this one's a little over 6 feet tall. And again, you know, it's this one has more of a human struggle going on in it. A little bit of disparity, but also a unity at the same time. So they kind of hold each other up, and you know, it's part of my goals as a human being, I guess. You know, just to be a part of, you know, having all these different people being part of a common experience, even though, you know, they're looking in different directions and whatnot. The axis is the same. And they're all kind of moving around that central axis, moving up and down, going upside down and twisting around. So it was a combination of the dance sketches as references, and then this ideology I had going on while I was working on it. Yeah. So, and that one's also cast in bronze. So I don't do bronze casting as much as I used to, but it's always a good experience. Working in metal is nice. I like the different materials in sculpture. Worked in metal, you know, bronze and steel, a little bit of iron, and now of course, ceramic and clay. I look forward to getting back to some clay pieces and a little bit of stone carving. And I'm really glad I'm drawing. You know, I got away from drawing for a little bit, so I'm happy to be back with that. I kind of just, you know, sometimes you just get busy making stuff, and so the drawings were really nice. They're like a little pause for me to really see and think, well, what am I doing? What do I want to do? Why am I doing this? So that's how I see these drawings in particular, are like part of a journal that go along with the sculptures.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Mike.
It's a wonderful collection. So now we're moving into the gallery of Susan Sullivan. Susan, are you?
I'm here.
Here, yes, excellent.
Here I am.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
So my name's Susan Sullivan, and I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I moved to Philadelphia in 2016 to attend the MFA program at PAFA. And a lot of people know me here because I work in the CE office, but I also teach at Camden County College as well. So this first painting, this was actually one of the first paintings I worked on after we were quarantined. So when I first started, I thought, oh, this is just going to be like a throwaway painting. I'm just going to paint right over it. So it started probably with that top part of the bikini, the blue and the green one, and it's really loose, but I was just really super frustrated when I did it. And I just thought, how can I even work on any work right now? Because my brain was just so like toggled with everything. And then, so I kept it around, as you often do with a painting. You'll keep it around and kind of sit with it for a while. And then I started working on the second top, the red one. And that one started to feel more comfortable because it was a little more sense of control. I could work on the patterning. I've had this, I'd had many friends just give me their old bathing suits a while back when I started working on these pools and pieces that people wear to be at the pool. And I, for a long time, looked at it and thought, oh, well, I'd really like to kind of like resemble that. So that's where that one came from.
So your imagery centers around pools.
Pools, yes, pools and places to swim. Because I've always had kind of a interesting relationship with pools. Like I love swimming, but I'm really afraid to drown. So it's, and also to me, it's like summer. Growing up in Oregon, it's, you know, it was always so rainy that it finally felt like summer when you could get into one of the public pools. This painting right here, it's an older painting. It's from 2018. This, I had actually constructed a pool in my studio at the time, and I was kind of working from that. And I was really trying to think about like what water felt like. So there's the splashiness in it. And there's this kind of post motif that I was working with for a while. There's a lot of things in this painting. I was really kind of trying to experiment a lot. And I kind of like these bouncy like balls, just thinking about like, you know, if you throw like you're at a pool and people start throwing a bunch of like balls and, you know, those big noodles and things like that in the pool. And it just gets to be a little overwhelming with all of that. And then it has the tile pattern that you'll see again in some of my work, is I really have gotten into these tiles that I'll put in. So it's kind of like you have this bathing suit that should be soft and should be floating around, but it's actually kind of hard.
We felt it was good to put it by the back door, sort of outside.
I think it belongs out there. Yeah. And this is another big guy. This again, see, you have the posts here. So originally when I started working on this one, I actually had 2 real bathing suits hanging from these posts because when we'd come back from the pool when I was a kid, you'd hang your bathing suit on the fence, you'd dry it out. But it also, I think a lot about like when you go to the river, sometimes you go to like the ocean, there'll be these posts kind of hanging out there, like just kind of like, is it okay? Can we go? Like, you know, is it stopping me? So this is actually called Keep Out. So, and somebody once told me that these posts reminded them of like burnt skin, which I really kind of liked, you know, like you have a sunburn. So this is because it's kind of a weird, kind of fantastical painting. And I did leave one of the real suits up there. This is the only mixed media piece in the group. And this is an older painting as well. So I love the way they hung these together. I have to say, Mike and Tina do a great job of like putting things together. And I was really pleased when I got to see all of these together. So this painting, this little one, So for a while, I've had this idea. I've wanted to do something with fish. So my father likes to fish, and he would often like take pictures of us standing in front of the fish he would catch. So a lot of times we would be in the driveway. So that's the driveway and standing in front of the newspaper where the fish is. So that was actually supposed to be the start of a different series, the fish series, but somehow because I wasn't sure about it yet, I decided, well, I'll put it in one of these pool paintings. So this is pretty much the placement where the kiddie pool always was when I was a kid. It's very much kind of like our backyard, and that lush green grass. Portland rains so much, so you're always having to mow the lawn. It's just growing. So I have some parts in the grass where it's a little, where the hose might have been, and so it got dead and kind of yellowy. And I left this kind of square in the garage door, because we had this funny square. I never understood why in a garage door, so possums would get in our garage when I was a kid. So this is really is all about kind of like growing up in Portland with the house, and kind of memories. A lot of my paintings have to do with memory. So I might use some reference materials, but there's a lot of memory involved. This one, I was feeling like I hadn't done a nice tile pattern in a while. So I knew this show was coming up, and this was the last like painting I'd done before the show. And I kind of thought, well, let's push some of these like bathing suits, but let's really get into this tile. And it's just, it might seem a little obsessive, but it does get a little relaxing after a while when you do these tiles. It's just, for me, it's all about like, where's the next color pattern coming from? Because I don't like write down what's going to happen. I just start mixing up paint and then thought, okay, so I'm going to use these like 6 colors. And then I really wanted the bathing suits to be like really kind of hot and bright, fluorescent, because it's just like that hot summery bathing suit that like you'll see in like suntan ads and things like that. So this one's called Malibu, because I was thinking, oh, California. This is my little Philly painting. I actually was walking through Fairmont neighborhood in Philadelphia, and I saw this squished kiddie pool on the side, just like sitting outside, and I just thought, oh, that poor thing, that little squish thing. So I took a picture, and I'd held on to it for a while until I was ready to do something with it, because I wasn't sure if I was just gonna just use that pool and put it somewhere else. But it's kind of nice to actually have something that's kind of got a Philly building in there. I tried to tighten up the painting at one time, and it just didn't work, and I had to like scrape everything back and just like loosen it up again. So I'm pretty pleased with this painting, and it's really kind of nice to see with that Portland backyard painting with that kiddie pool, because it's just kind of like, very different, but kind of very light. So these are kind of my long public pools. This one, so I thought a lot about when we were stuck in the house in COVID, and last summer, I kept thinking how bad I felt for all the kids that couldn't go to the swimming pool because they were all closed last summer. And it gets so hot here. And there was a while where I kept thinking, oh, I should do one with the mask floating around. And I toyed with that idea a lot. And I kept thinking, well, eventually we're going to get out of this. Let's not have that mask there. But even though this was taken from the Kelly Pool, which is in Fairmont Park. I really kept thinking about the pool I grew up going to at Pier Park, which would have different trees, but the whole time I painted it, I kept thinking about being at that pool that I grew up going to when I was a kid. And I pushed and pulled the inside of the pool a lot, like trying to get that inside of the pool because I wanted that depth. I wanted that, like, you know, especially for me, because, you know, I'm always going to be on the kiddie end of the pool. I don't want to go to the 8 feet part of the pool. So that depth is important.
There's something sad about a closed pool.
There's something very sad about the closed pool. It's lonely. It's just kind of, you know, it's strange without the people. This is another pattern tile painting. I often will look at, you know, kind of like fashion magazines and things like that to like just look at color and just different patterns. So there was this a lovely print that had the chevron in it that I was looking at. And so I kind of kept looking at those colors and I thought, well, I'll use those colors in my next tile painting and put that chevron in there. And I've been thinking for a while, I kept thinking, gosh, most of my bathing suits are kind of like female bathing suits. So even though like I did use a female bathing suit to look at this, but I kept thinking, you know, I really got to get like a Speedo or something like that. I need like a men's trunks. So to me, these are men's trunks kind of floating around on this chevron tile pattern. And here's another lonely pool. This pool is kind of modeled after one that was a hotel pool that I went to in New York. And it was at this silly hotel called the Dream Hotel. It was a nice hotel, but I thought about this pool a lot. And like, you know, having these like, all the umbrellas are closed up and you have these like kind of bright, fun, like lounge chairs, but nobody's there. This one actually has water, but it's still, you know, still kind of lonely. And I kept it looser. I kept trying to tighten it up and then I'd pull it back and loosen it up again. This is the only wall that doesn't have a swimming pool in it. I mean, there's a swimming pool behind the trunks. It's floating in the pool. So I've been looking at some kind of late 1950s, 1960s fashion. And I kept thinking I wanted some men's trunks. So there was this wild pattern on that somebody was wearing. And so I thought, well, you know, I really like that wild pattern. So I'm going to do some men's trunks kind of floating around in the pool. This was kind of like a painting that I didn't think that was going to come about. This was another kind of like, oh, COVID, what am I going to do? I can't paint, I can't do anything right now. And so this is in a frame because it's on canvas board because I just didn't think I could make anything work. So I thought, oh, I'll just do this idea I had. I wanted to do this idea with these kind of optical circles. And I thought, oh, well, you know, if it doesn't work out, it's fine. It's just on this canvas board. But it, of course, you know, because I planned it wasn't going to work, it worked out. And I kind of like that stretch of the top, just kind of like pulling across. And this one I kind of named Disco because I have the gold in it and they have these funny funny balls that are kind of optical. So this painting came about, I had actually made a small painting for a friend of mine for her birthday, and I used the same bathing suit, and I kind of liked it so much. I thought, well, I'd really like to paint that bathing suit again. And I started looking at tile patterns that are in like subways in Europe and things like that. People have started posting kind of like floor patterns on Instagram. So I've started looking at some of them. So this is kind of like shaped after that. And I thought, well, you know, I'd really like to kind of just really just mess around with the tile even more, even though they're kind of wiggly, these curves are a little more like noodles than I'd like them to be. It's not as tight as I'd like, but there is a lot of texture to it. For a long time, that kind of cerulean blue was white, and it was very white, and I kept it that way for a long time because I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I thought maybe I'd put some blue tile in between, but then I thought, well, no, I kind of want some water back there. So I really started working more and just put that blue in there and just kind of let this tile kind of float with the bathing suit in the pool.
Thank you, Susan. It looks great.
Thank you. It does look great. You guys do a great job putting these things together.
Thank you. It's the fun part. All right, now we're entering the gallery of Jacob Lunderby. Jacob?
Yeah, thanks again. Would you mind backing up for a moment, Tina, to show the outside of the space? Thanks. So hi, thanks everybody for coming. I'm Jacob Lunderby, and this is a small body of work I made over the past year. And I just asked Tina to back up because I wanted to show this painting on the right-hand side before you go into the space. You see there's a direct connection between the two. My work is, I use like digital photography and inkjet printing and other mixed materials, but I talk about these in terms of painting. So I don't think about these as mixed media pieces. I think about them more under the sign of painting. And so the body of work, there's repetition and variety in some of the visual ideas. And as you see when you go into the space, you know, having an exhibition like this is really a good chance to sort of play with a little bit of rhyming between different elements in my work. So the painting immediately on the right relates directly to the space of the painting that was at the back, in that I was photographing a lot of things around a garden over the course of the summer. And the big triangle in that painting that's on the right-hand side was digitally inserted as a kind of absurdly big sundial. And so it's called a temporary monument. Part of the idea was to sort of play with the built environment and architecture, as well as some different ideas about observation and seeing and thinking about property and care. So nothing is ever really directly, you know, dealt with in my work, but those two elements between that painting on the right and the painting at the back of the space is missing the triangle. And so there is this sort of void at the ground of the space. One more thing about the painting on the right is there's a little bit of like a, what looks like to be a painter's tape in the upper left-hand corner. Basically, I print on this translucent material and glue it down to a panel. And oftentimes I'll paint on the panel underneath. So there will be elements coming through the back of the painting. And so rather than that being like actual painter's tape, that's left over from an older painting, and it's a painted painter's tape. So it's a little bit of like just sort of playing around with like the materials that I used to make the painting. I don't remember what the original painting was that used to be this was the body for, but sometimes I'll recycle materials if the painting doesn't work out after a while. So I let those sorts of history of the panel kind of come through the work a little bit. I moved to Philadelphia about 15 years ago, and I teach drawing over at Drexel University. And my background, though, is primarily in painting. And so I've been making paintings with digital materials for a little over a decade. This painting and a few others have imagery of a topiary in them. So thinking about a bush that's a sculptural object that gets turned into a painting by the magic of photography. You can see there are these like visual striations vertically running through this image. So it's really hard for the camera to pick it up. It starts to do really odd optical things. So there's a little bit going into this idea of how I'm using these like kind of optical kind of things as a way of kind of playing with like attention, as well as like a little bit of visual like dynamic qualities and how they kind of cut through this sort of topiary. So this one, I called it Infinite Topiary, just based on the perspective of it. It was meant to be like appearing to be as infinitely tall if standing in like a fixed point. And it has a sort of oval to break the surface a little bit, to round the corners and to direct the field of vision. Another thing I share with Meghan is, we make panels in a really similar manner where it kind of floats off the wall. And so you have a little bit of a shadow when you take a look at it in an oblique fashion. There's a thin shadow that kind of separates the painting from the wall. And I'm interested in the painting as like an object also. Even this, it kind of hovers just a little bit off the wall. And then in the background, there's a painting that's hung perpendicular to the wall that we'll take a look at in a second. And so this one looks like it's a little bit more just sort of straightforward as an image from this garden. And there are just sort of minor tweaks that I do, in this case, to the space, working on the atmosphere and also working on sort of the way the sky pulls up. And I allow things like camera effects, like lens flares and things like that, to be in the final image. And so as you pull up, there is like a little bit of a very subtle sort of interaction between what's happening at the very top of the panel compared to, this glass house. So normally in this place, that disc at the bottom would be a little pond, and it was just dry when we visited. The place itself, I'm not making references to it, or the work isn't necessarily about this place in particular, but my work often is about going to an environment or experiencing an environment, even walking on the street, and something will inspire an idea. So for several years, it was about, windows, like different things about people like dealing with like window ideas. And now this, over the past year, was really sort of about, I think a really difficult understanding of how to process time and place. And so I think that's another thing that Meghan and I share in this work over the course of the year, is like a little bit of a fugue in terms of time and place. And so getting to the next one, talking about the painting as an object, this was the first occasion that I got it into my head to turn a painting on its side and let it project out from the wall. And so these two paintings relate to each other as well, the one that just disappeared out of the frame. But so this sticks out perpendicular from the wall. There's a left side and a right side, or a verso and recto side. And so this side has a digital fold in it, and it's looking through a screen into a landscape, photographed from inside, looking outside, and a little bit of a cut to create like another sort of layer to the experience of the space. And rather than keeping that side white the way I normally paint the edges. I took one of Megan's leftover cans of paint and decided to paint it a little bit of a coral. So there was a little bit of a color change from the wall, but also a very, very subtle like warning sign to not run into the thing. So no safety orange. And then this is another topiary, but it's been digitally cut, and there's like an intentional hiccup in the sky in the background. So I really enjoy having these like repetition with little variation and little blips as part of how you experience the sort of either the rhythm of an exhibition or a discontinuity in your visual experience. You can see the one in the background is a direct relative of the one in the foreground. And in this case, the print didn't turn out so great. And so I mounted it face down. And so you're kind of seeing it through the back. And so it's kind of like the idea of when people paint on glass, or if they paint on glass at like a window or something, and you're supposed to see it from one side, you're looking at it from the back, basically. And so this one is called Shadow in relation to the split painting that you had just seen. And rotating it on its side in each of these is just a way of trying to throw the perspective of the space a little bit, just so it isn't normally as grounded as it would be. Like I want to off kilter it a little bit, just as the beginning point for the experience of unpacking the work. The one on the right is the oldest out of this group of work. This kind of, I think this got started early summer, late spring, and it's having a really hard time having the camera pick it up because it's photographed through a coroplast plastic window where all these like really tight visual striations, vertical striations that really, really break up your view of the space. So it makes this really hard grid that you're looking through. And then I just kind of push that even harder with like a little bit of work in Photoshop. And so I'm very much interested in this case in making this like very, very rigid grid that you have to look through to see this like kind of very digitized landscape just in terms of the palette. I mean, I think I made this and then we had watched the original Matrix like a week later, and it was just like a dead ringer for the palette. And it wasn't an intentional reference, but I'm sure somewhere subconsciously it's down in there. You know, I have a long history with engaging with like, simulation and thinking about different things about representation, observation, and tech things. And so this is just sort of looking south towards a conifer tree and a little bit of the architecture on the side. And so, where you're looking and how you're looking and where your attention is going is just as much a part of my work as sort of this built environment. I think we're going to get onto the last one in just a second. And
so Jacob, did your technique follow your vision? Like, did you put the combination painting and digital together to achieve, what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was certainly striated, which made it really kind of fragmented as an image, and I just wanted to push it even farther than what your just natural experience would have been of it. I wanted to make it feel even deeper and even more like otherworldly in a way.
And I must say you achieved like quite a wonderful surface quality of your work that, I mean, it doesn't really show up on the camera. You really have to experience it in person. It's quite a wonderful surface.
Yeah, I like what's happening just looking at the camera too. Like it's really making it much more difficult to see. It's not that easy to see in person either necessarily, but it is one of these paintings that it kind of forces you to stay back a few feet to kind of get the continuity of it. And the closer you go, the more it just starts to break apart basically into, its DNA. And then the last painting on the right is taken inside this space. It's photographed it's a photograph of glass basically, and there's a plant growing on the other side. And there's several of these that are, I think, in storage in Cerulean as well. So these are all like paintings that are growing towards the glass, really struggling to kind of get any little bit of light as much as possible. So it's very foggy and very atmospheric. And it's another case of, using that framing device of that oval to kind of direct your attention and to kind of give it a little bit of a different sort of feeling than just the simple cold glass. But like I said, nothing's direct. Everything is always, another layer somewhere here or there. Either something is sort of obscuring your point of view, or it's obscuring your point of view in favor of letting something else sort of slowly unfold for you. And it all just sort of is about taking your time. I'm really interested in the difference between, taking a glance at something, or looking at something, or seeing something, which are all different levels of like engagement with work.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So now we're moving into Keith Leitner's exhibition. Keith?
Yes. Hi, I'm Keith Leitner. I'm a painter. I teach painting, and like most of the artists in the show, these paintings, except this one in particular, came about because of lockdown. I found myself in my house, couldn't get around, couldn't get out. So I used what I had at hand. And with exception of this particular painting here, which kind of predates everything by a good 5 years, I started painting on watercolor paper. I teach watercolor landscape, and I had tons of watercolor paper laying around, so I started painting on it on oil. And I have a very small house. I had very little room to move, so these are very small paintings, but I made the most of what I had at hand. And as I developed, they became more and more about surface and texture. I like paint, oil paint, and I use a lot of it. And I like to really get down with paint. And surface. A lot of these surfaces are torn into. There's many layers of paint here that I tear into and burnish with rags and try and, I lay groundwork and then I dig back through it to get some sort of form within the painting. But yeah, this is just me in my studio trying to keep from going stir crazy. But these in particular, since as a painter, the surface became very important. I really enjoy a good surface on a painting, and that was what I was going for in these. So I was experimenting with different ways, what solvent to add, what medium to add. I found out the hard way that these take a long time to make, because to lay down a bed of paint and let it dry, it takes a long time for it to be able to start to work over it without, tearing it apart. This one is called Scribe, and I really like this one. This is a lot of layers of paint, a lot of putting my hands into the paint, actually, which I had never done before, and letting it dry and then going back into it. And then as you let it dry, I start to wipe away, and I actually use sandpaper at some point to really dig into the paint and try and find what's underneath. So I never know quite sure how these are going to turn out. There's no plan. And they very often start out with just making a mess of paint and just trying to find some sort of, after a while, I kind of start to try and make sense of the paint and what's happening and how I want to bring it to a close. this is called handwork, and there's a lot of rupture in the surface. Again, learning how far you can push the paint, how much, you get a skin on paint, how much you can push it around, and really start to get really crazy things happening.
So Keith, your titles are very specific for these.
Well, the titles, a good friend told me that I was copying out by saying untitled. So I started to pay attention and try and get names for these. When I look at them, this one is called eroded, and that's indeed what it is. It's very much eroded. There's a lot of burnishing and a lot of wiping away. And the names just, I try and figure out what they bring to mind. What do they put in my mind? I found that paper in particular is very resilient. These were done on paper. I mounted them on plywood afterwards, but I would mount them on foam core, and I found that watercolor paper is very resilient. You can really beat it up. This is called Spring. Just the glow, that's what the name came from. And again, I didn't set out with this. I don't have any kind of working titles. The titles come afterwards when when the paintings come off the boil. Then I give them a name. But again, there's a lot of subtractive painting here. There's a lot of me, digging into what's there and finding things. I never know what, as I layer things, I never know what I'm going to find when I dig back down through them. They're very small. These three you're going to see now are actually the exception. These three precede the smaller paintings we just saw. I did these back in January, and they just came from actually canvases that were kicking around my studio that I just kind of dug back into and started painting again because I just was starting to go stir crazy. And I just started to see where they would lead. And these three in particular, this is called Creator of the Universe. There's no grandeur there. These three paintings that you're going to see now I named from passages from Emerson's The Poet, his essay. And this painting in particular of the fire. This is an exception. This is actually almost all direct paint with a brush. I wanted to use a brush and see how much impasto I could get away with. This is the exception. Most of them are really torn up. This one is just additive almost completely. After I was done, it kind of had this smoldering effect. That's why of the fire. And this one's called River of Time, again from a passage from the Poet. And again, this started out quite different, completely different than what it looks like now. Again, I never know how these paintings are going to turn out, which is actually part of the fun. One of the reasons why I do what I do. I just like, where they can lead me. It's a way of wasting time, quite frankly. It's a very pleasurable way of frittering away time painting.
They're wonderful. Thank you,
you.
Keith.
Thank you.
Well, and thank you to all the artists. This ends the tour and talk.